Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back for another episode of This Is Not Advice. And we are going to be asking Roy the question today, which is how should I conduct an exit interview? And just to give a little bit more context for our listeners here, we have noticed, of course, as many other people have, that there's lots of layoffs that are happening right now. And for many of many startup folks, this might be their first or second time having to do this type of process. And so we're just hoping to add a little insight on how you might go about it.
Yeah.
So,
So I think the first thing is it's important to just do an exit interview. I mean, we invest in lots of companies. I've worked at several big organizations, and the first step is just to consistently do it, which very few people do. And the reason why you want to consistently do it is because people are honest when they're leaving in a way that they are not when they are there, because they just don't need the same stuff from you. So they're oftentimes willing to open up about lots of things they never would open up on. And I think then, so that's whether to do it. And you definitely want to do it. What I do in practice is I ask people when they're leaving, we try to talk to them, but then I ask them for a write up in a certain way, is the way that I do it. Not everybody does it. And I just say, Indeed has a really good guide on their website, which we can link to afterward, that has like kind of do's and don'ts and that kind of thing. I think that how you design the exit interview relates to where you are in the organization and what you need to learn. So sometimes companies insist on doing an exit interview across the board because they just want to understand themes. Like, are there reasons why people are leaving that we need to understand? And obviously, as an individual manager, you can't really do that unless you are doing it in a way that's consistent with the organization as a whole. But let's just take the unit of like the individual team. Somebody works for you who leaves. I think the first thing is to just understand why. Like, why are they leaving? Was there something, assuming you wanted them to stay, was there something you could have done that would have prompted them to stay? You want to also tell them, by the way, the reasons why you're doing it and treat it with respect because it might be very sensitive for them. And then what you're basically looking for is some way that you can use their learning to strengthen the organization.
mhm.
So what feedback do you have on what you feel like things, what you could have done where things could have gone better here? What do you, uh, believe that I, as a manager, should do differently? Like, whatever those kinds of issues are, you want to pick them out. And there's no right list of issues and there's no right list of questions because it really depends on your hypotheses for what you believe you want input on. And then I always do one open-ended thing. Is there anything that as a manager in this company, blah, 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 you think I ought to know? Even to the point where if I'm a board member, like I'm a board member of a nonprofit, somebody left and I sent them an email and I was like, hey, is there anything you think as a board member that I should know? Just
Right.
that. And then most times people don't say anything, but then sometimes they're like, actually. And then you get this treasure trove because on their way out the door, they're like, well, such and such did blah, blah, blah. And this person, and this process doesn't work. And here's this hidden gem that nobody knows about. And so the open-ended is really, really critical. And then the last thing is you just want to feed that wisdom back to the organization as a whole. So
Mhm.
write it out, make sure you're sharing it with others, do that kind of thing. And I think these things are so valuable. And Sydney, you know this from our last review cycle, that I actually believe in trying to do exit interviews while people are in place, which is
Mhm.
basically like, if you were to leave, what would it be? What would cause you to want to leave, and what kinds of things, if you were to leave, what feedback would you give on? Because even sometimes just imagining yourself in that place can give you, internally different imaginative fuel that can give you different perspective on things. So
Yeah, I
that
think
kind
the
of thing.
great thing with that one too is that it can give the manager insight onto what their employee might be most excited about in the next year to come. I feel like
Yeah, good point.
times have changed a little bit where there used to be this emphasis on staying with the company for 5 years, 10 years, and now it's really started to see all across the board. Folks are turning over within a year, maybe 2 years. And so I feel like there's this bigger challenge now of how do we keep really quality talent in their seats, feeling good about what they're doing over a long period of time when the world is just moving
Totally.
so quickly.
I love that. And I don't expect anybody to actually type this down or cut and paste, but just a reminder that it's there. And if you search Indeed exit interview, I thought this was a really good guide, and we'll link to it eventually. Sydney, anything else you want to add before we wrap?
No, just that I totally forgot to introduce the both of us. And so, of course, Roy, head of Bloomberg Beta, and I am the chief of staff on the team. And we'll do that in
All
the
good.
front end next time.
All good.
Yeah.
And actually, let me ask you one more thing. If you were conducting an exit interview or having an exit interview conducted of you, what would be your favorite question you would want to ask or be asked?
I think, something that you had mentioned to me a few weeks back, which I thought was really interesting, is like, do I really want to know the feedback that folks want to give me, but are either too afraid to give me or don't feel comfortable giving me one-on-one? And so I think that's kind of a question that I would want to open the door with, which is like, what is that thing that you're making up in your head that you wouldn't want me to hear? Because I actually am quite receptive to hearing that.
Great. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. It's a good prompt for getting people to drop the mask a little bit. And you'll be able to find this episode and all the others at our compendium, which is thisisnotadvice.work. Note, not .work.com. Top level domain stuff. And if you prefer audio, you can go to Jam, and you don't need this whole URL either. You can go just to jam.ai and search This Is Not Advice, and you'll get a quick weekly snippet. And I think that's what we got. Thank you, Sydney.
Thanks, Roy.
To be continued.